What's up everybody, Brett here, and I'm going to be bringing you back into some more Total War Warhammer 2. This is going to be a 1v1 quick battle. I just finished this battle, and it was a good one, so I wanted to go ahead and hurry up cast it, and while it was still fresh in my mind, all of the different picks and counter picks and things that ended up happening in this build I thought were very entertaining, and it could be informative for you guys watching at home. So I had a build in mind when I first queued up, and I wanted to do something very faith, steel, and gunpowder centric. So that means cannons, handgunners, front line of swordsmen, imperial troops, and I took a steam tank here. And my build was looking a bit different. I had an arc lector as my lord. Yeah, I had just a few different variations of this build, and then I saw that my opponent was going to lock in as the vampire coast here. And that made me change some things. That made me reconsider. Because if you guys are familiar with the matchup at all, you'll know that artillery and gunpowder units kind of rule this matchup. So, making a few quick adjustments, but still wanting to keep it thematic and fun, I decided to take two great cannons. And you'll see here also at the last minute, I had them kind of safely tucked in this position here. But this map is so wide and so flat that I just had a really strong feeling that my opponent would be bringing artillery and that he would be placing them at the fore of his formation, because it's very hard to get your artillery, you know, skirmished out or something if you're going up against the Empire. They don't really have the tools to get up in your face that quickly, vanguarded, and to deal with your artillery. So it's relatively safe for the Empire as well versus the vampire coast to go ahead and put your artillery up front, maximize its range. And you'll see here what's going on in the background as I'm talking is a bit of an artillery duel. My opponent has 3 carronades, so the Vampire Coast version of the Great Cannons. The Great Cannons being a little more accurate and pretty devastating. The accuracy is what you really want to focus on because it makes them very good at counter skirmishing against opposing artillery. I'm moving my steam tank out to the front. For those of you who've never seen a steam tank before, let's go ahead and check this bad boy out. So, 160 armor. That might be the most in the game, the most natural armor of any unit in the game, but they do suffer from having only 10 melee defense. And they used to have an actual physical resistance ward buff, but that got removed. They of course cause terror. That's not going to be relevant against the Vampire Coast, but they are also unbreakable. So very good in melee, and they are also very good at range as just a simple artillery piece with 380 range. So I'm using all my available tools here to counter skirmish these carronades and to try and win. At the moment I have my focus fire split, and I'm going to see how effective that is and look to change. My opponent is going to be seeing the steam tank as a huge target, and I did that kind of on purpose as a bit of a distraction carnifex, hoping he would focus some of his fire on the steam tank, which honestly isn't really a threat to his artillery, and that would free up mine to go ahead and pick his apart. So one of the changes I made last minute to my army composition was I decided to take the Emperor himself, Karl Franz, on Deathclaw. So Karl Franz in this matchup, as long as you bring Gul Moraz, he is an excellent anti-large armor-piercing component of your army. If you're facing off against something like Luther Harkin up on a Terrorgeist, then he's going to be very good at dueling him in the air and taking him down. But you have to be very careful about where you take those engagements, or you're going to suffer lots of damage from units like these, the deck gunners. So the deck gunners have 245 range, and they pierce shields. So when they get into range, they are absolutely devastating. So they're going to be something that I'm going to want to focus down early, if at all possible. And just a ton of other gunpowder units in this army composition. So there are also the zombie pirate gunnery mobs with handguns. So I'm seeing 2 of those and 2 of the deck gunners. In addition to having 3 carronades, that's quite the gunpowder line. And I'm sure he was hoping to win that and force me to come to him. My front line is made almost entirely of swordsmen. And you'll see here they are shielded. They beat every single zombie troop in hand-to-hand. And their shields make them somewhat resilient against the gunpowder units of the zombie vampire coast. The swordsmen here, we have, I believe 5 of them, And out on the flanks we have spearmen with shields. Same thing, they're going to prevent any kind of large shenanigans, any large units, fast movers, things like that from getting into my back line, shutting down my handgunners or my cannons, and just one basic unit of spearmen as something of a defensive unit. They were looking to protect me from any sort of scurvy dog, fell bat type play. In addition to Karl Franz as my leadership corps, you'll see here I also have a Witch Hunter. So the Witch Hunter, I have him stripped down. I just have Accusation on him. So it's a draining effect. Very good versus a single opponent. And I thought he was very thematic in this matchup as well. I think he could have a home in this matchup as long as he's not focus fired. So something is going to happen to him this game that was pretty surprising to me. And I'm going to hope I catch that on camera and show that to you guys. And this unit might be the MVP this battle, the Light Wizard on a simple horse, cutting some costs here, not giving him the bar extra armor, but wanting to have instead the increased speed for more mobility. I have 3 things on him. So the Nets of Amnitok, which are going to allow me to, if I need to. There aren't any really good targets for this on the opponent's army, but Exorcism, which lowers leadership to undead units every time I cast a spell, is going to be pretty relevant this battle, as well as Shim's Burning Gaze, which I use to pretty great effect here. The magic damage and fire damage is going to be very good at dealing with the Vampire Coast. And like I said already, 3 handgunners in the back, good armor piercing. Honestly, in this matchup, you could go with crossbowmen, but that just wouldn't fit my theme for this battle. So we're going to rely on these guys to do some heavy lifting for us. And let's go ahead and we can actually, let's just hit play, because there's not too much left to go over. Just lots of zombies in the front line, some pole arms kind of encompassing the flanks and rear of our opponent's army. And they realize they're losing this artillery duel and that they're going to be forced to move forward, which is rough for an army that's as slow moving as the Vampire Coast is. Now this unit here was hidden. So the Morgul Haunters, he has quite a few of his items still in his kit. He unleashes a mighty roar for us. He has Deadly Onslaught for more bonus armor piercing, Potion of Strength even more, Foe Seeker for speed and vigor. He has his Chilling Aura that reduces speed as well as hunger, which will allow him to heal and regenerate when he is in combat. So yeah, let's not miss too many of these glorious shots here in the front line. So what I've done was I raced forward with my Light Wizard and I shot a Shim's Burning Gaze here to help force this carronade to crumble. So you see it's already down to 1 model and it's breaking. Once you damage Vampire Coast units severely, their crumbling becomes almost a given. It's very hard once they get to like the 20% health area that they're going to be able to bounce back from that. So we're switching all of our focus fire now onto this leftmost carronade, and I think we're going to be able to take that out. Our cannons are taking a good bit of damage, our crews are anyway, but the models are still active and still firing. And here we go, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to get my Light Wizard back up, and Shim's Burning Gaze is a very cheap spell and it's pretty accurate. There was a time when magic missiles dominated the game, and then there was a time after their nerf where they were pretty much useless. But if you'll see here, all we're really trying to do is break the morale and force these guys to crumble as quickly as possible. And because he's on his horse, he can just scoot away. Count Noctilus on foot, excellent anti-large duelist with the Moon Dial to help him summon even more units into my back line. As well as Invocation of Nehek for healing and Pit of Shades for a nice AoE spell if we were to blob up. And we'll see if he manages to get any of those off. Now I move forward with my Witch Hunter. I'm shooting Count Noctilus, doing a little bit of damage, but he was just outside my range for Accusation. And I realized as soon as I ran up that I was going to be taking some heavy fire from the deck gunners. I'm keeping Karl Franz as far back as possible because these are the units on the field that I'm the most afraid of at this point. Witch Hunter is feeling a little brave, but at this point I decided I need to move my army in. I need to cover my cannons, not let them engage in melee anywhere near my cannons or my handgunners. And my handgunners are beginning to fire. I created little spaces in between my front line and staggered them, just so that my handgunners could have many different fields of fire that they could feel free to shoot into. It lots of different angles of fire, I should say. Karl Franz still being held in reserve. I need to hold off until I see a good target that will allow me to use his ability to snipe with his anti-large Gal Maraz. Another decent Shim's Burning Gaze there, just going to take out a few units, and I was targeting the deck gunners there. One of the units is already being broken by some constant cannon fire. Witch Hunter is taking quite a bit of damage, but he's still alive, so that doesn't... Taking damage on a Witch Hunter does not mitigate his combat effectiveness, thankfully. The front lines have engaged, and we can go ahead and put it in slow-mo as swordsmen hack up the polearms, the polearm variant of the deckhand's mob, and they're going to do great in this fight. Unfortunately, one of these handgun units has gotten tangled up in melee, and he's going to have a rough time detangling them. This other unit here, and at some point we're going to start focusing this down. We want to get rid of all of his ranged options and all of his armor-piercing options. That way Karl Franz can feel as safe as possible. And one of the things that the Vampire Coast does very well is summon zombies. So the actual spell has a very low range, so he's really only able to get it right behind my unit of swordsmen, which is still quite good. But he's also going to have the Moon Dial to summon another unit, and there are 2 summon units on the field. His Morgul Haunter manages to get back here into my handgunners, but I'm going to net him down with Net of Amnitok, and I'm going to bring in my Spearmen in reserve to back up Karl Franz. With Stand Your Ground and Gal Maraz, he's going to be an excellent anti-large killer. He's popped all of his buffs, so if he's going to turn and try and fight Karl Franz, and he's going to do a lot of damage. And at this point I realize I'm taking handgunner fire, deck gunner fire, and that huge burst damage from the Morgul Haunter. So I'm going to get out of there and send him over here to try and beat down these deck gunners. You saw there that a nice pit of shades here from my opponent on top of my my cannon crew routed them. I'm going to be able to get them back on at some point. I've been having issues today with lots of dropped orders. So for those of you familiar, when the Total War Warhammer 2 first launched, it was a pretty big issue that units were just straight up dropping their orders. They would engage in combat and then they would stop. Or you would give them an order and they would just stop running. I've experienced that quite a bit this evening in previous games, which are so frustrating that it took some very close games and made them, to me, almost unbearable to watch. It's not fun to watch it when you think someone's like failing their micro. You know, I get that, it's kind of cringy. But I mean, my spearmen there were mid-combat and then just dropped their orders and stood there. The Witch Hunter here is being slowed, I believe. At some point he ran he barely touched the tip of the Morgul Haunter's slowing aura, and he's not going to be able to get away from Count Noctilus, which is unfortunate because he does have 360 fire while moving as well as accusation, which I probably could have kited Count Noctilus all day long with a Witch Hunter, even in low health such as he was. I've managed to spread out my handgunners, and we're going to be picking apart the slow-moving zombies as they try and lock me down. Karl Franz, he ended up taking a lot of damage on the approach to get those deck gunners, but ultimately we did manage to get them. I'm using my Light Wizard. I kept him in the front line for a bit. He does have an encouragement aura, which will help your low leadership units continue fighting. Some rallying handgunners here in the background. But now I'm just using him to bounce back and forth between the handguns and to shut them down. And he's not really under any threat versus the missile infantry of the Vampire Coast. They're very squishy. Their melee stats are non-existent. Any other race, their melee, the melee prowess, I should say, of their range units would be enough to at least hold their own against a Light Wizard on a standard horse, but not the Vampire Coast. Great cannons. I'm trying to get them back online. My steam tank here, still at about 40% health, has now been forced to engage in melee. And some of these are the polearm variants of the deckhand mobs, and they can do pretty good damage versus a steam tank with their armor piercing. But giving him Stand Your Ground puts him up to a respectable 37 melee defense. And that was a nice little buff I was able to give him as I flew by with Karl Franz. So, I mean, if he wants to take all of his units and spend a bunch of time attacking a steam tank that has 160 armor, he's going to take a lot of damage. Oh, and a nice Shadow Wraith there from Count Noctilus. That did a ton of damage. So, one of the downsides of taking a Light Wizard is that you don't really have room in your army for a Jade Wizard. So, healing would have been great on Karl Franz. He does not have regen like, let's say, Boris Todbringer. And a steam tank, believe it or not, you can heal it with a regrowth or an Earthblood spell. It affects it the same as any other unit. Nice steam cannon shot going off there. And Count Noctilus laying face first in the dust next to a cannonball after he gets shot down by my handgunners. So you'll see here the battle ended up being very widely spread. Karl Franz took down some summoned deckhand mob units that were chasing down my handgunners, barely saving them at the last moment. But I gotta say, the MVP here was certainly the Jade Wizard. The Nets of Amnatok locking down the Haunter just in time for my Spearmen to get in, using 2 Shim's Burning Gaze to help us win the artillery fight, as well as several good Shim's Burning Gazes into kind of the flanks of several of these zombie units. And he got a lot of kills. You don't usually see that many kills on a stripped down Light Wizard with only 1 offensive spell. So let's go ahead and take a look at the breakdown. So yeah, the steam tank did its job. It absorbed a ton of damage, a lot of magic from Count Noctilus, and my cannons did a good job at defeating the enemy's artillery, which is what they were there for. And my handgunners, I was able to spread them out. One of them definitely got more value than the other, but a mistake that a lot of newer players make is they'll bunch up their ranged units together, and that makes them very vulnerable, especially against a unit, an army like the Vampire Coast, who does benefit from having a lot of summons that they can just drop directly on top of your back line and shut down units like handgunners quite well. And you'll see just big numbers all across the board on the infantry, and I guess they're the unsung heroes of this battle. They stood and fought really to the end. Even these units that had low HP were still fighting at the end there. And as cheap as these zombie pirate deckhand mobs are, they are still just a step below in efficiency below the swordsman units in this matchup. They're just really the perfect frontline units, and as cheap as they are, having 5 here, I honestly could have done with more. If I didn't take the steam tank was a bit of a fan service for those of you guys out there who love the Empire. I do as well, and if I was playing campaign, you best believe I'd have 4 or 5 steam tanks and a single army. But had I cut this, maybe gone with another cannon or a mortar. I don't like to cheese. I don't like to do things like 4 or 5 cannons. I think that can be pretty unfun. But maybe a mortar instead. This is 2,200 gold. So for that price, I could get a mortar, maybe something like 2 Pistoliers, and have a bit of a skirmisher cav component to my army. And that's 3 additional units for the cost of this steam tank. So getting this number of kills and having it absorb that much damage was necessary in order for it to be worth its cost. The Witch Hunter got picked off. He got a decent number of kills. I only managed to get off 2 of his accusations, so I didn't get full value from him, which was disappointing, but he did manage to do maybe about 40% of Count Noctilus' HP and damage. And when you strip him down to just an accusation, he's a very cheap unit, and a lot of times if they go untouched throughout the course of a battle, they'll get 100+ kills, no problem. The Light Wizard's utility could not be overstated this battle as well. I generally tend to shy away from overuse of Net of Amnatok. It's a strategy that's been around for a long time in the meta. It's not one that I almost ever really take advantage of, but I saw an opportunity in this matchup to potentially lock down an aerial lord or a large target like Count Noctilus, and then bring all of my gunpowder to bear. And I was kind of looking for that cool take him down, Mumma kill, Lord of the Rings moment. My opponent's army I thought was very good. If I was going to critique it, I'm not sure exactly what I would do differently. Perhaps just expecting this matchup, knowing that you're going to be facing off against an Empire player, I think I would go into that expecting great cannons and handgunners, or crossbowmen, most likely, cheaper and very effective at dealing with all the Vampire Coast units. But I would be expecting a ranged battle, so I might try something different. I mean, either you go all in and you try and contest the ranged battle, or you concede the ranged artillery battle and you try and swarm the Empire player and negate that advantage. Those are really your only two options. Um, and the Vampire Coast certainly has tools to do that. The Haunter here, with its stalk, they have lots of other units in the Vampire Coast roster that have Vanguard deployment as well as stalk. And these are tools that allow you to get up close, surround your enemy's army. And, you know, if had he been kind of up and around me with Mornghuls and Scurvy Dogs and Fellbats, maybe change out some of these deck gunners for the deck droppers with handguns. I could see him having a very scary mobile army that would have forced me to put a lot of my gunpowder fire in lots of different directions, and it would have been very difficult to protect all of them. And Fellbats, I think, are a pretty good utility tool when you're going up against this much range. Their ability to fly over the front lines and bog down ranged units. Let's say he had, if we're just kind of theory crafting here for a moment, find a way to cut costs. Get maybe 2 units of Fellbats. Let's see. Maybe just change out 2 of these polearm variants for the standard variants. I would probably drop most of the abilities and items off of the Morgul Haunter and add a Fellbat or 2. And as the battle begins and you're having that artillery duel, you send the Fellbats forward. Sure, they get shot. If they're getting shot, your artillery is not getting shot. And if they're allowed to get into melee range and kind of swoop down on your opponent's artillery, they'll have paid for themselves. 350 gold is nothing to the Vampire Coast, whose front line is kind of ridiculously cheap. But anyway, guys, I think that's it. That's enough going back and forth with hypotheticals. I hope you enjoyed watching this battle. I enjoyed playing it, and I enjoyed casting it. And I'm thinking about some other builds that are more like anti-meta builds. I've mentioned before in some of my other videos that playing the meta is not really interesting to me. I don't really enjoy, you know, doing the perfect build. I want to try and take one centerpiece unit and build an army around it. In this case, it was the steam tank. So if your goal is to win, then, you know, bless you. I hope you win a lot of games, but my goal is to have fun. So I'm working on some builds right now that I think are fun, and I'm just going to say one of them is revolving around Heinrich Himmler and some of the Vampire Count's new Bloodline armies. So without any further ado, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one.